Hello and welcome to the mess we're in with Robbie,
Arty,
Arty, and Gunnar.
Hello. Thank you for introducing us. I thought it might be less crazy if we. It doesn't really make sense that I'm always introducing us.
I don't know if I'm great at that job, though. To be honest, I'm quite awkward about it.
Yeah. What are we going to talk about? Benji, you kicked us off. So what would you like to talk about this week?
I want to talk about Mermaids, and I think it's relevant because recently the BBC, they had like a list of like charities that you could contact if you need support with things involving gender identity and transition, and they've taken a bunch of the charities down. So they took down Gyres, which is
Is it Gyres or Gyres?
I don't. Who knows? But it's an acronym. And
GIF for GIF. Who knows?
Yeah. And Gendered Intelligence and Mermaids. Yeah. And Mermaids is the one that I think has the most publicity and that people know the most about. And so I kind of know a bit about that, and I've been learning a bit about that, and I would like to talk about that.
Okay. Let me just say before we launch into this that quite soon after I announced the same news, someone pointed out that the story actually originated on Pink News. So we can't be sure if it's true. Pink News, as we all know, don't employ journalists. So they might have just clicked the wrong link or something and came to this conclusion. So
I was actually looking very specifically to find other sources, and I found a couple, and I think their sources for their articles were not Pink News. So
okay, well then maybe it is true, which would be wonderful news. So why? I mean, I think it's wonderful news. GNC, why do you think it's wonderful news?
Well, I mean, if it's being on the BBC, people are going to trust it. People trust the BBC, I think, generally. I mean, I'm not in the UK, but that's the impression I get. So, like, if the BBC was promoting these organizations and saying they're trustworthy, meanwhile, like, somebody committed suicide after doing what they told them to do, and meanwhile, like, courts have told mermaids to stay away from a certain kid and a certain family, like,
that's right.
Clearly, this is not a completely ethical and like well-run, well-researched organization. If they're like doctors that they've recommended people to have lost their licenses and had to flee the country. Yes. Clearly, this is not an alternative to the real gender clinic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And those doctors, they're still recommending those doctors.
Yeah.
They're just insane now, you know?
Yeah. And they'll I mean, I don't know how we should get into this really, but.
Well, let me just say one thing. I believe that the story about the child who was who they were trying to transition against the father's will and against the child's will. I believe the judge didn't say that mermaids were not permitted to contact the child. I believe there was something a little bit more complicated than that. Mermaids were able to get a small correction, and they've been using that to kind of undercut the story. But the basics of the story are absolutely what happened. You know, you've one parent who's uncomfortable with the child's gender nonconformity, and you've one parent who's comfortable with it. And the person who's comfortable with it is trying to stop them from getting surgeries and hormones that will potentially destroy their lives, while the other parent isn't. So I think that's definitely the basics of what happened there.
Yeah, and that one was really shocking because if you are a charity that's trying to prove that you're reasonable and that you think that some kids are trans and need to be transitioned, but you want to prove to the public that you're not maniacs who want everyone to transition, this would have been their perfect opportunity to say, no, this child clearly should not be trans, right? You know, this would have been their opportunity to say, this is a clear example of a kid who is not trans and who should not be put on the track. Especially and they fucked it up completely because they were just like, they went all in.
Especially if the child themselves doesn't want to transition.
Listen to the children. And the child is saying, I am not trans. I am not a girl. And they're like, no, but your mom said you are. So
actually, I'll tell you a funny thing. When you say that mermaids are trying to look normal, this is a tweet they did this week. I'll read it out here. They said, if you are losing friends and work because of your transphobic views, it's not because you are a victim. It's because people can see that you're attacking vulnerable people with your hate. There's a simple solution. Stop.
It's so 1984. You know,
yeah.
You know, if everyone else in East Germany is angry at you for being critical of the Stasi, you should just shut up and start liking the Stasi. You know.
Yeah. They're quite a frightening organization. I mean, my feeling about Mermaids, Benji. Sorry, I won't let. God, look at this. My hair. I got a haircut and I have no idea what to do with it. But my feeling about Mermaids is, how can anyone take them seriously if the CEO did a TED talk, which I'll link to down below when this goes out. But the CEO did a TED talk where they basically said that the husband did not like their gender non-conforming son playing with girls' toys. That created, obviously, some tension within the house. And there's no other explanation. The next thing, they're off getting hormones. That's it. It's like, wait a sec. Isn't there a bit in the middle here where you're supposed to be talking about, you know, all the other signs that were there that led you to this belief? No. Straight on hormones, and then the moment the kid hits 16, it's off to Thailand to get the kid operated.
And also, like, I'd like to mention, like, these people are not following these Mermaids is a UK charity. They're not following NHS guidelines. Like, they literally tell people, go to Germany, go to the US, go to whatever country where these doctors in private practice will give you same-day hormones for your kids.
Are you sure they actually say that? Yeah.
Well, I think they might have taken down, but there's this one Dr. Mueller from Germany, and it literally, like, a little blurb saying, like, we'll do a 3 to 4 hour like intake, and by the end of the day, if hormones are advised, then we'll give you the hormones the same day.
I could be wrong. I better check this out, but I think that might be the same doctor who performed the operation on Green's child. I could be wrong. I have to check, but I know they definitely recommend one doctor who's the same doctor who performed the operation. You know,
I don't think so, because this one's in Germany, and I know that they went to Thailand.
No. I think it was a German doctor, and they went to Thailand together.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong. I will look into that, but I think there's something. There's definitely, but my point about that is that there's definitely a very, very small circle of medical practitioners that they use. You know, they had Dr. Weberly on their website until Dr. Weberly had to flee the country, and then and they were still on the website for a while, and then they went. One of the things that people point out about Mermaids is there's not a single expert on in Mermaids. They are all parents of children who've transitioned, and therefore they are all going to defend their position, because, of course, if they're wrong, if they made their decision based on things like, I don't know, a homophobic parent, you know, then they've done something terrible. And if I thought I had done something terrible to my child, I would be fighting. Oh no! Oh, sorry, that's my poker night. I've got a poker tournament coming up, so I have to turn off WhatsApp to make sure people don't see that. So I would be defending my position like a tiger. I would be so.
I think that's called the sunk cost fallacy. If you've gone so far in on something that to admit that you've done something wrong means to admit that you've harmed your own child, your brain will go into massive self-defense mode. Like, there's no way I'm going to accept this. So they're not looking at this reasonably and logically and calmly. They're looking at this with they're weighted heavily on the side of, I can't let myself see what I've done because it will hurt me terribly.
Like, have you guys seen, there's like a little clip, I don't know what it's from, but it's like Susie Greene with, I think, her mother, and they're talking about the son, or the child's, I guess, the child's, so just to explain to everyone, so they put, Susie Greene is like the CEO of Mermaids, and she put her seemingly gay boy son on puberty blockers, and then cross-sex hormones. And when it was time to get, the surgery, the vaginoplasty, as happened with Jazz Jennings, as we are aware will happen with all kids, the penis didn't grow enough. They didn't have enough flesh to do a penile inversion. In this little clip, it's her and her mom laughing about it. Yeah. And I'm like, how could you be laughing the fact that you put your kid in this situation where they have to get, like, people who don't know, there's like an old-fashioned vaginoplasty where they use part of the intestine to make but that one like smells bad, and it doesn't actually the same way
use part of the colon.
Yeah, the colon. Yeah, and it's a really not a preferred surgery. Like I've seen like teenage kids online crying that they didn't realize that they have to get that surgery because they were on puberty blockers. And anyway, so because it's like not a good it's not really good long term. Anyway, but she was like laughing about it, and I'm like, clearly something is not okay with this woman, that she's laughing that she put her son in this precarious situation. And like I don't know, like the thought that her son would ever desire or need or want any sexual feelings, have a sex life in the future is completely irrelevant to these people.
That is devastating. People, I mean, my sexual satisfaction was something that keeps me happy in my life. It means a lot to me, being able to have sexual satisfaction. And the fact that these children, when they get put on puberty blockers, literally will not be able to ever have an orgasm. Ever. And the parents are like, but they fit in, they're not gender nonconforming. So that's what's really important. That's fucking devastating. I'd rather have a gender nonconforming child who can have sexual satisfaction and be happy than a gender conforming child who can literally never experience orgasm for their life. It's just devastating to me.
Like you can look up studies, like the very few long-term studies there are about people who transition, and one of the biggest factors linked to their quality of life is their ability to have a long-term partner. And if you make your kid basically asexual by putting them on blockers, and then they have no sexual desires, their chances of having a long-term relationship and being happy are much, 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 much lower. And already dating as trans is super hard to begin with. Like, these people don't consider, I've made a video about this. I don't understand how when your gay kid comes out, you're like, oh no, they can't have babies and they're going to be doing like the icky sex. But then when your trans kid comes out, you're like, they'll never have sex. It's fine. And we're going to sterilize them. It's fine. Like, how can... and she talks about this too. She talks about how they're sterilizing the kids, and she's very like blasé about it. Meanwhile, there's like studies that show people who are infertile or sterile, they have like a 25 to 60% chance of having psychiatric issues. I don't understand how you can say this is going to fix all their problems when like you're creating more problems that also have psychological effects.
And also what like from what I know about transitioning in terms of the drug aspect, I believe that suicidal ideation is increased by some of these treatments. Isn't that right?
Yeah, the puberty blockers. They were saying for a long time that the whole point of puberty blockers was to have a pause button, which is a complete lie. Maybe that was the intention in like the 90s, but we all know that's not what happens.
No, 100% that was pushed by the pharmaceutical companies because they were like, new market, let's push this lie.
But like,
and I should remind people that Benji, you are a detransitioner. So I should remind people that Benji really knows what she's talking about. Yeah,
so like 100% of kids who go on puberty blockers go on to cross-sex hormones, and if you do that, the chances that you're going to be sterile are very, very high.
Don't they also create the need? Don't the hormones create the need for a hysterectomy? Isn't that what's?
Yeah, but that's a little bit longer. Let me finish the short-term thing. Sure. So originally they were saying like the whole point of blockers was to like take a pause and prevent suicidality. Meanwhile, like Michael Biggs studied the data from the Tavistock, pediatric clinic, and found that actually suicidality and self-harm increases on blockers. So both of the aspects of blockers, the pause button is a lie and the decreased suicidality are a lie, and yet we're putting kids on it. And then so this is something else. Like if you do as they recommend and take your very small child to the US or Germany or Thailand or whatever to get their hormones, you don't understand that your kid who is like, I don't know, 12 or something, this is going to lead to them like if they're a female getting a hysterectomy, probably, because if you're on testosterone for more than 5 years, you're supposed to get a hysterectomy because the chances of like cancers are so high. And also like I've heard stories of people where they're like their fallopian tubes and ovaries and stuff like fuse together or atrophy together, and it can create like a really high risk for infection. Like Buck Angel had that. People can look that up. Buck Angel, the uterus atrophied, and got infected, and he had to be rushed into like emergency surgery to have it removed.
Buck
Anyway,
was,
so like when you're
Buck was furious when he heard people saying it was completely safe.
And also, like when you have your uterus removed, it's not like a neutral thing. It has like, it doesn't just make babies. It has other purposes in the body. It also has like a structural purpose within the pelvis. Like people will have like urinary issues and stuff after a hysterectomy, and like they will have reduced like orgasms and like maybe even painful orgasms. Like hysterectomy is not just like some fun thing. It's an organ that's there for a reason, you know? So like when you're making this decision for your 12-year-old kid, you're actually making like lifelong decisions for your kid. And like also having hysterectomy has been linked to increased risk of dementia.
Wow.
So like when you're
crazy.
deciding that your 12-year-old should be on puberty blockers, what you're actually deciding is that they're going to like eventually have to get a hysterectomy and like have an increased risk of dementia. Do you know what I'm saying?
They're just everything is short term for these parents. I think they're just panicking and they're like, the child is in distress right now. You know, the child doesn't like their gender or their sex right now. And they're helicopter parents who are like, I got to fix everything, right? I have to attend to my child. You can't leave a child alone anymore in the 21st century. You have to medicalize everything, right? And so they're just freaking out, but they're not thinking of the long term. It's so hard. Somebody said something once that like the hardest thing to do with a child is not do anything when your child's in distress. And these kids who are going through this gender distress, what you need to do is leave them alone and let them go through it. You know, and that's hard. Helicopter parents are like, I have to do something. I have to do something, you know?
I always say that to people. I always say that, you know, you could say that puberty is a form of gender dysphoria, you know?
Especially for girls. Oh my God, you hear these stories.
Like, you could do something that's not transition. There are other things you could do.
Yeah.
Like, you could, for example, I've heard of this thing where, like, when a girl gets her period, the mom throws, like, a little party and invites all their girlfriends over. To like make it a positive experience. Like there are things you can like
I don't mean to pull that face.
But just like there are things you can do. You can like, especially
the two guys are like, that's weird.
If your kid is like gay and you can tell that they're having like a lot of issues with that, you can like in like a neutral environment involving the parents, just like hang out with some gay people so your kid doesn't feel as much of a freak. They can see these people like them. You know what I mean? Like, or just have like your kid talk about puberty and stuff, or like get your kid a therapist for body image issues. Like there's a lot of things you can do that are not putting your kids on puberty blockers.
Yeah.
But even those are being closed off. Sorry, Arty, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that's such a great point, Benji, that like if you're a parent who's itching to act and you want to help your child, there's so many alternative ways to do it than going to an endocrinologist, you know.
But can I say those ways are also being closed off, because if you think about it, right, if they get in, they say these days, oh, the school is going to get in a LGBT plus person to come in and chat to the kids, and in comes fucking Alex Drummond with a beard saying he's a lesbian, then a lot of young girls are going to look at that and going to say, okay, I know I'm not that. You know, and they see kind of trans men who seem to think, because it's short term, that they have everything together and everything's going great. And they think that that's more representative of them, you know?
Exactly.
They're really one of the other reasons why I love that women like Kathleen Stock are becoming more mainstream now, more famous, is because she's such a fucking brilliant model for a lesbian, you know? So is Magdalene, even though Magdalene's passed on. Magdalene Burns is such a great model for a lesbian, you know?
She's such a hero.
Oh my God, you know, every time I see her, I feel like she's still alive, you know? She just she'll never die for me, because she's so, she is how angry.
What are you doing? You're going to make me cry. We're live.
Her anger and her punchiness and her standing up for herself is just, it's going to last forever. Like one thing I want to do when
I am going to cry now.
when the tide turns on all this, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to mount a campaign to get an apology for Edinburgh University, because Edinburgh University kicked her out of every LGB group she was in, because she insisted on her her living reality as a lesbian woman who was only attracted to other adult human females, and they fucking kicked her out. So I'll be after LGBT. I'll be after Edinburgh University when this is all over, because it's because it's a shocking, outrageous.
I just talked
injustice.
to a lesbian, like a Canadian lesbian, who I think she just graduated university, and she was like, I only tried going a few times, and every time that I said I was a lesbian, I was the only one in the room saying I'm a lesbian, and they would, like, you know, start like a fucking inquisition into what does that mean when I say I'm a lesbian, and then they kicked me out of all the groups.
That's
like
the
this
most,
is like a very even in high school, you can talk to high school kids who this happened to them. This is like very, very common.
I have noticed that the very act of saying that you're a lesbian is considered somehow improper or something. You know, I've definitely noticed that, and I noticed that Fred Sargent put Pink News on the spot by saying, "How many lesbian journalists do you have?" And they don't have any. They don't have any. You know.
Oh my God, I'm disgusted with the. Speaking of Pink News, I just want to interject because you know our beat from last week was Silicon Valley being horribly sexist. And Google, apparently, according to Pink News, so who knows, has given a grant of £300,000 to Pink News.
Yes, that's right. I think it's kicking in now, and they've just been paid off. So that's Google, who also tried to put pressure on Lisa Mullen. Is that her name? The MP?
No, Truss.
Liz Truss.
Yeah.
Liz Truss. They tried to put pressure on Liz Truss to basically roll back women's rights, and you know they then, you know, they also have their thumb on the scales in by financing Pink News, which has been successfully sued by a lesbian, Joanna Cherry, and also is being sued by me. So they had to take a story about me down. Actually, let me tell you something else interesting. Let me see if I can find this. What was it? Oh, no, I won't be able to find it, and I'm just going to leave everyone hanging. Oh, no. What was it? No, I'll remember in a sec. Sorry. But Pink News are oh, yeah. And well, this isn't what I was going to say, but more good news, as far as I'm concerned, is that The Guardian looks like it's on the way out. Because The Guardian I used to love. You know.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, it's like
all the way in Canada. We used to get a paper edition of it in this house I lived in with all my roommates because we were all like avowed lefties, you know. And we're like the Guardian. Yeah. But
The Guardian. I mean, I used to have a joke about The Guardian that they, you know, they just ignore every single story. They ignore everything, and then they'll. And what's brilliant about this week is one of their editors or something. People were giving them shit, and I can't remember what it was for, but just saying, "Oh, you know, get the fuck out of here." And one of their editors tried to pour water on the fire by saying, "Look, I want to assure cis women that we're not blah 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 blah." And it's like everyone heard cis women, and
you lost everyone at cis, yeah.
Go fuck yourself. I mean, I still can't believe that there are actual grown adults who think that women are happy to be described as just a type of woman that lives alongside this other type of women that has a penis and balls. You know, it's the most outrageous thing that they think they can get away with. You know, and sure enough, every tweet by this guy was ratioed to infinity. You know, and they just.
Can you explain for people who are not on Twitter what ratioed means?
Ratio means when you're. I'm not on Twitter, so why am I explaining? Ratioed means that when you write something and the amount of replies is so much greater than the amount of likes, it shows that you whatever you said was just despised by everybody. They didn't just go, "Oh yeah, I totally agree." Everyone just kind of. Jumped in and destroyed you. And that's what happened with this guy, you know. So, you know, they finally found out that when you alienate your female audience, it may not be, although, you know, they'll probably be saved by woke American idiots. Like I had some.
Google will come in there and
Google will give them a couple of quid, yeah. But I had an American friend write to me who lives in Seattle. And obviously believes the Guardian line on me, which is that I'm a terrible bigot, and isn't it great that I've been thrown off Twitter? You know, this is someone who never ever got in touch to say how shocked he was by J.K. Rowling's treatment or the medicalization of children. Never bothered getting in touch about any of that stuff. But as soon as the Guardian writes something nasty about me, he's on to me. He's on the blower. Although again, not on the blower because he didn't call me. All these people do the same thing. They write some passive aggressive letter, and then they sign off by saying, "I've had this from 2 people." The other one was an Irish journalist called Pat O'Mahony. They sign off by saying, "Don't argue with me about this," or "No need to reply to this," because they're terrified that they know they're wrong. They know they're wrong. They know it's more complicated. They know it's more nuanced than what they've been told, but they are fucking terrified of actually coming over to your side, because they know that over on your side is where all the bad people are, where all the cancelled people are, you know.
And if they actually realize this, they're gonna have suddenly it's not good and bad, left and right, light and dark. It's complicated and nuanced, and that's scary to them. They just want a nice simple story, you know.
Yes.
Gay is good, anti-gay is bad, trans is just like gay.
Yeah, exactly. It's really it's just so fascinating to me, though, that the way the blind alleys that's leading people down.
Can I also just say, like, just for the viewers, like, to compare being anti-gay to being detrans or somebody who doesn't want to transition, even though they have dysphoria, makes no sense. When you're gay, you're accepting what comes naturally to you. You're accepting the way you are. When you're anti-gay, you're in complete denial of who you are. When you're trans, I know it's transphobic, but when you're trans, you're in denial of what your body is, and you're trying to live your life based on your denial. And when you detransition, or when you decide not to transition, you're trying to accept the reality of your body and who you are in the world, instead of living in denial. So to compare them makes no sense at all. I actually think being trans is more like being an ex-gay than being you know what I'm saying? I've met trans people who are like, if you talk to them for a few hours, they'll explain, like, oh yeah, my dad thought I was a fag, so he beat me when I was a kid, and he stole my toys, and by the time I was 16, I was thrown out of the house, and blah, blah, blah. They just have a lot of trauma, and then they were a trans woman. And I'm like, how is that not somebody being an ex-gay? Anyway, I'm just saying, for people who, like, put 2 minutes of thought into it, that's what I think is going on, more than, like, if you detransition, you're like an ex-gay who's in denial of the fact that you should be trans to be happy.
What I can't understand is why groups like Stonewall are so in denial about the homophobic nature of some of this stuff. Like, how can they deny that if someone who is a fully intact male identifies as a woman and insists that lesbians should be into them, how can they deny the homophobia? That's just completely part of that. I don't get it. It's
but I think they're just looking for a new beat. I was tweeting about this like this morning. Like, gays have run out of issues, and they're just like, there's all these men in dresses who, like, want to yoke trans to gay, and then the gays. And that's been happening since the 90s. And it was only in the last couple of years when gays ran out of stuff to lobby for. They're like, okay, fine. We'll ally with these rich, straight white men in dresses. You know, that's harsh, but it's true.
It's true of too many. I mean, the thing is, like, there's a kind of a, like, my friends Shan and Emma and Debbie and all these people would probably be called old school transsexual. You know, and they recognize that, you know, their distress meant that they transitioned and they had to, but they hold on to the reality of their situation. They do not describe themselves as women. They describe themselves as dysphoric men, you know? But there's this kind of thing that's come from, not from trans people, but from trans allies. Yes, the allies. They're the ones you really have to...
They're looking for something to be angry about, and they're looking for something to stick up for, and gay is passé. Everyone loves gays now. Nobody hates gays anymore, except for religious conservatives. But so, like, this is a new thing.
And they and of course, as you say, they're applying this previous civil rights fight that has nothing to do with this civil rights fight. What it's actually doing is empowering straight people to an extent that they shouldn't be empowered. I always tell the story of the the lesbian woman who had a friend who was trans, a trans woman. And she asked, the trans woman said, would you like to go out sometime? And the lesbian said, no. I'm only attracted to females. And she slapped him across, or he slapped her across the face.
Yeah,
you know?
That was, you told me that a few weeks ago, I think in one of our interviews, I think we recorded it even, and it was so upsetting. I mean, think of that every day, how upsetting that must have been. I know. It's a very sensitive thing to tell a friend that you're not sexually attracted to them. And to be slapped in the face by a friend is just like, Jesus. It
goes into, it's something I call the dog that didn't bark. There's a Sherlock Holmes story. It might have been Handed Baskervilles. The way that Sherlock Holmes knows that the master who was the person who was behind, spoiler, was behind the murders is because his dogs didn't bark when he was the person who came.
Well, that was the big evidence.
That was the big evidence, and this fight is full of dogs that aren't barking. It's full of lesbians who can't speak up. It's full of people at work who will be fired if they speak up. It is full of things that are not happening, and because these things are not happening, everyone thinks there's no problem.
Oh my God!
I think also another huge factor is just like, the trans lobby gives so much money to LGBT groups that all of the LGBT groups have become de facto trans groups, because that's where they get like 90% of their money now. So why, how could they rationalize, they rationalize like talking and spending so much time talking about gay people if they're getting all their money about trans things?
But that's the other great thing, because there's this when you believe in gender ideology, which is completely contradictory and bamboozling and full of the most dumbass things ever. It's just nonsense. It's full of nonsense. It's full of nonsense that there's some men, they're more comfortable as women. Women need to be take off, but some women are non-binary, so they have to take off. They have to cut off their breasts to make themselves non-binary. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right. You don't have to change your body, but you have to change your body.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The men, the fully intact men, they don't have to change their body. They're fine. But it makes perfect sense that the girls are having hysterectomies and
these children, we need to get them before they go through puberty, because then their bodies will be ruined. What the fuck? Yeah.
It's full of all this kind of bamboozling, crazy. There's all sorts of new lingo attached to it, cis women, all this sort of stuff, And the reason that is useful to these organizations is they can charge people like the police, people, HR departments. They can charge these people to have long sessions where they explain, well, maybe your child is more of a G.I. Joe than a Barbie. They can fucking bamboozle.
The demi boy,
yeah.
They can a demi boy.
But they can bamboozle. Like, my favorite image in all this, I always find it funny when I think about it, is all these apparently mermaids. Let's get back to mermaids. Mermaids had a 3-day training session with the Liverpool police, Merseyside police. 3 days. What the fuck were they telling the police about for 3 days?
3 days.
3 days. Mermaids are talking to them, showing them.
I wonder how long like a sex trafficking tutorial is. Is it like hours? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or like if you're doing a domestic violence seminar, do you think that's 3 days?
No.
I really wonder.
My God, Benji.
Yeah. But that's because this is because it's bamboozling. It's like you have to explain it. Maybe your child is more of a G.I. Joe than a Barbie. Well, then let's see where they are along the gender line, and which one of these 100 genders could they possibly be? They've taken the kind of mental illness that is Tumblr, and they're doing it to all these nonplussed cops who are sitting around going, oh yeah, okay, oh yeah, I guess so. They're like, I don't know. And it reminds me of someone. I actually pulled this up. I had this ready, but AS Police, which is official police account for the lesbian, bisexual, and transgender liaison team, right? And they tweeted this: "How often do you place a gender on people without even realizing? As today is non-binary day, it seemed a great time to share a few ways we can alter our language to support non-binary people. So instead of his or hers, try theirs. Instead of ladies and gentlemen, try distinguished guests. Instead of men or women, try everyone. Instead of lady man in the red shirt, try person in the red shirt. And instead of
some of that's not so bad. Some of it's like, let's just be inclusive and friendly. But some of it's just like telling someone they to their face is like, fuck you, you know?
Yeah, like I have a friend who's a lesbian.
But here's the thing, before you go on, Benji, but just let me point out something. If someone steals your fucking purse, you don't want to say, oh, a person in a red shirt just stole my purse. You want to say, some fucking bloke. Oh, no, careful there. You don't want to assume. You don't want to assume.
And every second counts. This person's getting farther and farther away with your purse while you're sitting there being like, what about the pronouns?
But
you know?
This is an important thing because just as with when you're reporting a crime, the police need specifics to narrow down who they're looking for. And you're saying you're going to widen it out so that it's everybody. And you know, this is also reflected in crime statistics, you know, because like they just found this guy in the UK who was cracking one out in a hospital bed in the female section. He was in a woman's ward and he was cracking one out to child pornography, you know? Yeah. You know, and that was reported on BBC News all through it. She was brought, she was found, you know, it's such it's one of the things that really angers me about this, that pedophilia is now being put on women as a female crime. Because of these people. It just drives me mad.
Yeah, that's one of these things that I was slow on the uptake on. There are a lot of feminists who are like, you know, if we record these crimes as happening by women and not men, that's going to affect statistics. And I was like, well, that's pretty abstract. I don't really care about that, is what I thought 2 years ago.
Yeah, sure.
But then I really looked like it's changing so dramatically. If you took a graph of pedophiles who are female, there'd be like a flat line and then a spike. And that would correspond not with women suddenly molesting children. It would correspond with recategorizing males as women. And I was like, oh my God, this is shocking. And this is important. We really do need to, because safeguarding is all about, you know, we
robust.
need to know this stuff.
It has to be completely robust. The thing about safeguarding.
Also, like it's safeguarding and also funding. Like governments give funding to women's shelters and stuff based on the statistics of domestic violence. And if all of the domestic violence, or not all, if a bunch of the domestic violence is now being reported as women on women domestic violence because trans women are women, then they're literally getting less funding from the government to combat domestic violence despite it happening at the same rate.
Exactly.
And do you see the end result is going to be like, we don't need separate spaces for women and men because women and men commit crimes at the same rates, because look at all the women who are doing these things.
I know.
So it's like men call themselves women, and it's just it's like undermining in the literal sense. Like you're just eroding the barrier between women and men. And let me tell you another aspect to it that you know, I'll tell the 2-year-old or 2 years younger Arty Morty, who is not worried about. That's right. So I'm like, I don't care. I'm like,
let me. The prison population in the UK is by male and female is 80,000 men are in prison, right, and 3,000 women.
Wow, you have a tiny prison population compared to America.
Yeah, no, sure. But it will be the same ratio. It will be mostly the same ratio. So basically, if you can imagine what the stats are going to do, people are going to think, oh, there was just a huge outbreak of women committing sexual offenses around the year 2020. And it's not true. It's a lie. It's an insulting it's a misogynistic lie, and it drives me mad that when I see the press doing it, when I see the BBC saying she about this person who's looking at child pornography,
I want to pause you there because we really do need to get Heather Mason on this podcast to talk about prisons and what's happening in the prisons. We've been behind the scenes. I'm confessing something I probably shouldn't online, but you know, we've been chatting about getting Heather Mason on our channel for a while. She's an amazing woman. She's so cool. We should do it. I'm saying it out loud.
Let's do it next week.
Next week. Let's contact Heather and let's see if she's ready. Is she free next Sunday? Let's
text her.
Yay! I love Heather Mason. She just followed me the other day on Twitter. I was so excited.
Well, then you know, You know she's in the right. Hey, what should I do about Twitter? Should I try and I might try and sneak back on? And did you hear that some guy?
No, don't, because they'll make it so that your phone can't make any more Twitter accounts, and if you use your Wi-Fi, you can't go on Twitter and stuff.
I think you can change your IP address, and you can use a burner.
Maybe with a VPN you could do it, and if you had somebody else's phone number who doesn't have a Twitter. Maybe.
You can get a burner phone. You have to
be very careful, because if some people report you for being like Glinner on Twitter, your account will immediately be. You have to be completely anonymous.
Wait, you hear this though? Some guy was accused by all these Twitter sleuths of being me because his syntax was the same. He got a call from Twitter. He got a phone call from Twitter.
Oh my god!
Oh yeah, and I forgot to say there's another thing. A friend of mine. His name is Stuart. He used to have an account called Wings Over Scotland, and he said,
"Oh yeah."
And me and him were banned around the same time. And he said to me, "I heard back from my Twitter contact. My banning was a deliberate and considered act, not an overzealous moderator or an algorithm. It was nothing to do with the supposedly offending tweet, but the whole account, and indeed me in person. The decision was made in London, not California, and will not be revisited. My contact used the word staunch with regard to Twitter's stance, but I don't think they were using it in its uniquely Scottish-Irish sense. I imagine it'll be the same with you." And I have a feeling it was the same with me, because just before I was banned, I wrote to Katie Minshaw, who is the Twitter person in the UK. I'm going to post it later on, what I wrote, and I'm going to say, well, she never replied, but I said, listen, I'm being targeted by Twitter activists. Will you do something about it? You know, because I know you said you were going to do something to Joanna Cherry and Joan McAlpine when you spoke to them in, I think, the Scottish Parliament. You said you were going to crack down on the amount of women being banned, which of course she never did. She never did. Women were constantly being banned after that. So I have a feeling, I wonder whether it was something to do with me saying to her, you know, are you going to do anything about this? You know,
I want to see more fucking names. I'm so angry at Twitter. I want names of literal individual employees who are responsible for this. I want to drag them, you know.
But that's shaming. We can't be like them, Arty. We have to be better than them. But
no.
But they
cancel
have a proper
culture.
haircut on me.
I'm all about cancel culture when it suits me. I'm kidding, of course.
I think that might be a good place to end it, because I kind of have to rush off, and someone just insulted my haircut. Look.
Well, they gave you money to get a better haircut, so it's fine, no?
Wait, have they given me money?
They give you £20. But the whole point, like,
I don't even know how that works.
The whole point of them giving you money is that the comment will stay up as long as possible, like, as for the amount of money they gave you. So if you end it now, you're kind of screwing this guy over.
Oh, okay. I won't do it then. I'll let's go a few more minutes. I'm sure there's other stuff to speak about. I'm delighted. Thank you very much, Liam. That's very kind of you.
But what I was going to say about the Twitter censorship stuff, like, yeah, I don't think anything's going to happen until somebody within the district that Twitter is operated in. I assume it's San Francisco. I know, like, most of the big tech companies are headed up in San Francisco. Somebody who lives in that district needs to take them to court for something that's like a really solid case. And it's going to be a huge uphill battle, because doing that against Twitter is not actually doing that against Twitter. It's doing it against Facebook. It's doing it against Reddit. It's doing it all of the big multimedia, social media companies. Yeah. So like, it would be like a huge uphill battle. But like, so that's why I was hoping that somebody, like, we know when Our True Lesbians was suspended, I'm really still hoping that there's some lesbians who used that subreddit regularly, who live in San Francisco, who want to take it to court.
Oh,
because that's the only way that anything would get done. Like, I was talking to like a lawyer friend of mine about this, and like, you need to be in their district to get anything done. So like, whatever we have to say is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, that's kind of what I
like. You need to be a citizen of that political district to get the politicians to listen up. You know, politicians will answer the phone for anyone in their district, but if you're out of their district, you're like, you're not my problem. Fuck off. You know? Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, is this true? Helen Swift, is that true? They banned our pregnancy?
I don't think I think they made it private. Let me check.
Holy shit. I kind of like that they are.
I heard about that. Everything to do with like female anatomy is being attacked, obviously, by these trans
Good.
males who
For
just
the
hate
When your enemy
RPCOS,
is making a mistake, don't stop them. That's just they're showing their hand. I really like that. You know, these places are full of trans-identified men who just hate women, and I'm glad that they're being exposed. You know.
yeah, it's private now.
It's
And
private. Wow.
it looks like they're trying to make an alternative community called Our Baby Bumps, but with Reddit, like I don't know if you guys know
you
what's
can't
up.
use the word pregnancy without being attacked by trans activists. You have to go private, you have to batten the hatches, and then you have to create an alternate. That's fucking insane.
But like, even if they're trying to make an alternate community, like when the first wave of bans happened and like a lot of the radfem stuff was shut down, somebody made a subreddit that was like, it was like, I don't know what it actually was. It was like feminist theory or like feminist discussion or something like really, you know, innocuous like that. And it got banned because they said they were trying to like recreate a banned sub. So if they decide, so if they decide that Our Pregnancy is like a horrible, evil sub, if anybody tries to create an alternative, they'll shut that down.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
but like, I don't know if you guys know what happened with like our PCOS, but they like they like instated their own mods who are trans women who don't have ovaries.
That was
to talk about it,
right?
Yeah.
So I want to be a little bit of a moderator for the outsiders who don't know anything about Reddit, because I don't know anything about Reddit. But PCOS is a condition that has to do with. Can you explain PCOS?
It's polycystic ovarian syndrome. So there's like 3 characteristics. One is to have ovaries of a specific kind and a specific like formation on your to have cysts on your ovaries. The other one is to have high testosterone, and the other one is to have irregular or heavy or super heavy or like just like weird periods.
Right. Yeah. So this can occur to any female, but because of the testosterone factor, it actually has a little bit of a link with trans, because females who take testosterone actually are more susceptible to this, right?
Well, they're basically giving themselves PCOS. Like they stop having their surgery. They stop having their period because they have such high T.
And there's pain involved as well, isn't there?
Yeah, like because you have cysts on your ovaries, it's really painful.
Ooh, anyone who is watching this who's not really, you know, who's only half following this so far and really, you know, hasn't really been looking deeply into this subject. Isn't it incredible that you don't see these conversations happening? Why are these conversations not happening? Why are people not better informed? And it's because they are being deliberately shut down. These conversations are being deliberately shut down. You know,
frankly, especially about women's health in general. Like I'm learning so much about women's anatomy that I didn't know about women's. Like you were telling me about, you know, if you have a hysterectomy that affects all these parts of your body. I had no fucking idea.
As a straight man, it's not the area of women's anatomy that I want to know stuff about. I don't want to know.
As a gay man, I never had any interest in women's anatomy.
But it's like extraordinary to me that the details of all this stuff are just waved away. And anytime anyone wants to speak about them, they are mercilessly attacked. You know. Yeah.
So, well, on that note, Benji, tell us more about PCOS. I want to hear more.
Well,
tell me less, Benji. Tell me less about PCOS.
It can cause like some people will have like no periods for months, and then they'll bleed for like 2 or 3 months straight and have like really bad anemia and have to get like iron supplements, or like I've known people who have ended up in the hospital because they were so anemic. And it's like Helen Swift just said there's already not much information about this stuff out there. Like I totally agree. Like if we talk a bit about sex ed, I don't understand why PCOS is really, really common. I don't know the number, but it's something like 1 in 10 women or something. And
my God.
Yeah. I think maybe that's not a correct number, but it's something really ridiculous like that. And then same with endometriosis. It's not that uncommon. There's like a lot of things that women have that are not like vaginismus or like septate uterus or septate like vagina. Like there's a lot of things that are like, if you have that issue, you need to know what's going on because it's an actual problem. It's not like, oh, you have cramps. It's an actual problem. But we never learn about it in sex ed. There's very few, like, there's websites that have this stuff, but it's not like kids are all sharing it with each other. Like females are generally unaware of what's going on in their body unless they themselves are like, I want to know this, and go and find the information. So yeah.
Well,
but,
you know,
like, when I told my friend that they had like instated a trans mod on our PCOS, which like the brigading thing is technically against the Reddit rules, but for some
Oh
reason,
yeah,
shockingly, they disregard
for
it.
1 quick second because, like, again, outsiders don't know the words. So brigading is a unique thing to Reddit. Can you explain how somehow Reddit's rules have made a male in charge of the PCOS Reddit subreddit?
So brigading is like when people congregate on another sub and they explain like how they're going to take over a sub or how they're going to get it banned. So like one thing that somebody who's done this a couple times would do is they'll like post child porn on a sub and then they'll report it right away and they'll say, look, the mods didn't take down this harmful content from their sub, and that'll be grounds to like take the sub down or something. So like they'll like plan these kind of things like openly in public on other subreddits or maybe in private subreddits, but like that's against the Reddit rules. But for some reason, for certain subreddits, when brigading happens, they're like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. This specific thing they did is not against the rules.
So a male can attack a subreddit, a forum, and spam it with garbage, and then complain that it's filled with garbage, and get the boss in trouble, and then replace the boss essentially with themselves.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
And all of these things are to people who aren't part of these moderator groups or in on Reddit as a commenter and stuff like that. They're all very arcane. They don't really, you don't really know the ins and outs. We just had to explain brigading, but the effect of it is that there is a suppression of information. Like as we now know, the bloody pregnancy Reddit sub is gone. So without us realizing why, our lives are changing, our access to information is changing, and we don't know why. I mean, what I find another thing I find very upsetting about this whole thing is that women had such a small space of time that they could talk about it. Like I remember going to see the vagina monologues, which wasn't my bag, but it was at least there, and I was very aware of how much the women in the audience were enjoying it. They loved it. They were being, they were talking about, something that they've been probably told all their lives they shouldn't talk about, and then a few years later, they're banning productions of the vagina monologues because
it's just like, what happened? They really people are just trying really hard to be good, but they're not. They're not calibrating this properly. They're just kind of like.
I think, like, if you look at this,
well-intentioned people. All these people are well-intentioned. They're just screwing up. All the people who are banning the vagina monologues, they're not assholes. They're idiots. It's not an axis of evil. It's an axis of idiocy. These are people who are fucking up, trying to be good.
Yeah. That's the thing. They get very, very hurt when you criticize them because they are desperately trying to be good.
Yeah, but they're screwing up being good. They think they're being good, banning the vagina monologues and, canceling people.
People don't understand the extent of this. Like, I was talking to somebody in real life, I forgot who said that they have a friend who's like a guy and his sister has PCOS. So this guy, he's like, like a normal liberal type who's like, yeah, trans people, respect them, whatever. So he didn't realize that because like trans women or women is being taken literally, that's why some of these things are taken down. Like people who don't know, a lot of the subreddits were taken down because they were like inciting hate against a minority, aka trans women, by just like not using language that's about them all the time. So this guy was like very angry that now this female only sub that his sister would go on for her like PCOS stuff is now being taken over by men. And he was like, I support trans people, but I didn't realize by supporting trans people, this was the outcome. So people literally don't understand what how everything is connected together.
Yeah.
Like the vagina monologues too. Like, do you think, I agree with what you said, Arty. It's like an axis of idiocy, but I think also, or like ignorance at least.
Yeah.
But I think also it's like that combined with a couple of people who know exactly what they're doing, who are like, this is what we need to.
Yes.
Well, these are trans women who are resent women. There are some trans women who genuinely resent legitimate females, and they're bitter.
I saw a piece, I saw a video by someone who knows a lot about safeguarding, and they were a social worker, and they said that it only takes one person to groom an entire organization. Wow. So what you need is you just need one or two people in positions of power, and they right up until the moment that they're caught, accessing pornography or something, child pornography or something, their workmates will swear blind that they're the most innocent, wonderful person they've ever met. That's what groomers do. Groomers, they don't just groom. That's why people get very offended at my use of the word groomers, but they don't understand the word. Groomers don't just groom children. Groomers groom whole communities. They groom whole societies. We are in a position now where a bloke who's sneaked into who groomed a group of people into allowing him into a women's ward in a hospital, has also groomed the press into calling him she when he uses when he uses child pornography.
Absolutely.
This is grooming.
And they still use the word. They're still like, that's a woman. I'm going to validate her pronouns. After they've already been charged. Like Jonathan Yaniv. Why is anyone validating this person as a trans person? Isn't that an insult to trans people? This is someone you should not count as a trans person. If there's a line between fake trans and real trans, Jonathan Yaniv is clearly in the fake trans category. So why are trans activists themselves saying, yes, she? Every time you say she, you're saying many of those
activists are like Yaniv. I put on my blog how two people. One, his name is Eric Joyce. He's an MP over here. Another was Peter Bright, who was an
right. Yeah, you're the pedophile whisperer. Like
Jessica Fletcher. Jessica Fletcher.
You're the Jessica Fletcher. Wherever you go.
Wherever Jessica Fletcher went, a dead body would just wash up on the beach.
Jessica Fletcher was Murder, She Wrote, by the way. Sweet old lady. Every town she would go to, someone would turn up dead.
Yeah. And just like that.
Glinner is that, but for pedos.
I used to attract these guys who would argue with me and say that, these concerns aren't really concerns. You're making a load of fuss over nothing. You're bigoted and so on. What a surprise! What a surprise that these guys turned out to be pedophiles. And so it's not like, one thing I try and impress upon people is that the vast majority of people are trying to be good. But as you say, there are some key people in key positions. Amy Challoner is the best example. Amy Challoner was in Stonewall until I wrote a piece about why the fuck is Amy Challoner in Stonewall.
That was so shocking. It's so shocking.
I was called transphobic for pointing that person out. It's like there's a group of people and they are not good, and there's not very many of them, but they're there and they're in key positions, and these people in key positions are the ones who, when they're finally found out, everyone will go, what? I just don't believe it, but we're all the ones saying, it's like Jimmy Savile over here, no one could believe it because he was in charity, he was doing kids TV show. I myself, when I heard the rumors about Jimmy Savile, I thought, people just like believing that because he's in a kid.
You heard rumors before it all came down?
Yeah, definitely. There were rumors going around. Yeah, but I just thought it was people like to believe that because they like to believe that children's entertainers are somehow. I thought it was a kind of a thing. But of course, it's completely
kind of vaguely homophobic too. Like anybody who is friendly and effeminate and likes children is a pedo.
I never thought of him as effeminate. I just thought of him as.
I actually have never seen him, so I don't know.
He's grim. He really is grim. Once you know it, you can't watch him. He's frightening. But he was basically just a thug from Liverpool. Sorry, there's nothing wrong with being from Liverpool. My wife's from Liverpool, but he was like a thug from that part of the country. Happened to be that part of the country, and he came to London. I think he was involved in rackets and all sorts of things. He just kind of did what a lot of sociopathic people do, which is he told people what they wanted to hear. And he kind of invaded.
He hustled his way.
He hustled his way into hospital charities. He had the free run of hospitals and stuff like this. And as I always point out to people, the only people who
I know there's a commenter who's angry. Liverpool is great. I love Liverpool.
We don't. I like Liverpool. I love Liverpool. Stop it.
Geordies are awesome.
They're not Geordies. They're Scousers.
Scousers. Sorry, I don't know. I'm from Canada. I'm trying really hard to seem cool.
The people in the the people in the live chat are all mentioning like how there was rumors and people know, but how come nobody does anything? Like this is the exact same thing that happens in like a lot of communities. Like if you talk to like environmentalists or like weed activists or like whatever, there's always like some man who has power, who's at the top, who there's some kind of unspoken advice that women should stay away from him. But then of course when it's unspoken, not all the women know. So then some of the women get close to him and then he hurts them. Like this is very common in a lot of communities. And like we're seeing it in the trans community for sure, because literally there's tweets where they're like, even if a trans person is a rapist, you shouldn't talk about it because it's transphobic. So like if a trans person rapes someone, don't say anything.
Oh, well, remember the Black Trans Lives Matter person who raped there's a trans woman, male person, who was running the Black Trans Lives Matter thing in several years ago. This was many, many years ago, back in the Obama days, in the beginning of the Black Lives Matter.
I forgot her name.
And then a female who was a female to male trans man was raped by this person. And they said, yes, I did it deliberately because I wanted to create like non-binary babies. And it's like, that's crazy. You're admitting that you sexually assaulted a woman. And this person ended up several months after this incident, this person visited the White House and shook hands with Barack Obama. And it's like, you literally openly admitted that you sexually assaulted a woman, but you're trans, so everybody's just going to ignore it.
And the person they assaulted was trans themselves. So when the trans people are always on about how we care so much, like trans health, trans rights, trans life, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you actually cared, then you would not want trans people to be raped by other trans people.
Exactly. But this goes to show how the sexual dynamics don't change. The trans woman still has the male privilege, and the trans man still has the female lack of privilege. You know?
It's like when do you see trans men in the news? The only time you see them in the news is when they have babies. That's the only time. You never see trans men talked about any other time. You know, but trans women are all over the shop. You know, and it's because they have male privilege. They push their way into conversations like men do. You know, they demand to be heard. It's just male behavior. You know, and it hasn't changed. I tell everyone that story you told Benji about the Morgan Page one, where you were told to shut up because you had male privilege because you were a trans man. I mean, that's the most extraordinary story. But listen, I have to cut this one short because once I insult Liverpool, that's my time to leave. But no, I have a poker tournament to try and lose. But that was great. I really enjoyed it. I thought that one went very well. We went past an hour, and it was
we went long.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't even talk about our various projects.
Oh my God, Benji has this amazing other podcast. You're cheating on us, Benji. You have another thing. You're so pan. You're so Molly. Benji has a detransition podcast every Friday. It goes live, and it's freaking amazing. You have to watch it. Yeah, and Graham has the coolest thing too. Oh, sorry.
I have a new website that's completely free. Unless you want to comment, because then I'll be able to get insulting people to pay to insult me, and everyone else can pay to chat. But all the content is free, so I'll post up a link to that as well in the thing. It's called The Cry of Glinner.
I have signed up for it. It's amazing. I've gotten a couple things. It's super cool. The first one I thought it was a personal email, so I responded to it, and then I realized it's like, oh, this is actually like a podcast, so you didn't get my response.
My podcast is called Post-Gender Funk, and it's on my. Somebody asked, and it's on my channel. So like GNC Centric. GNC Centric, that's my YouTube channel. Also you can check out my Instagram, GNC Centric. So it's me and my co-host Mackenzie, and hopefully every week we're gonna have on a different detrans guest to talk about different detrans issues.
It's so amazing. Mackenzie's delightful. She has the most her smile could light up.
Yeah, she's awesome. I'm like I feel like very honored that people want to be on the platform with me. Like I feel very honored that I get to today share their stories and their views.
Was a very, very good example. You're just fascinating on all this, Benji. You know more about this than either of us, I think. You know, and it's just fantastic to listen to you.
Oh my God, Benji! I just feel so humbled to be your friend. You're so
I
cool.
feel the same way. I feel
Thanks,
the same
Arty.
way about both of you idiots. Okay, great. So look, let's end it there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I will try and leave links to these things in the description. Yeah, see you next week. Oh, and let's do that interview with that woman you mentioned. I forget her name.
Yeah, Heather Mason.
Heather Mason. Yeah. We'll have next week. We'll hopefully have Heather Mason.
If she's available. Oh, then we'll find a time. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. See you guys. Bye everyone. Bye.
Are we going to background chat after?